Settle in, if you will. Let your body ease into stillness. Your eyes grow heavy, and your thoughts loosen their grip on the day. We're going to travel backward, not to war, not to revolution, but to a peculiar in-between, to a time when the future was dazzling and strange, and the past lingered just behind the curtain of modernity. The 1920s, often called the Roaring Twenties, though not everyone heard them roar. In the United States, it was a decade of transition, wrapped in jazz, wrapped in prohibition, wrapped in the shimmering optimism of new machines, new fashions, and a new idea of what it meant to be modern. But today, we will not follow the headlines or the flashbulbs. Instead, we'll slip quietly into everyday moments, shadowing the hours when Americans were not working, not marching or politicking, but simply living. In the quiet folds between the frenzy, how did they pass their free time? Over the course of this journey, we'll stroll through city blocks and dusty country roads, explore parlor rooms and cinemas, amusement parks and kitchen tables. We'll meet the ordinary and the extraordinary alike, often in the same people. So, gently now, as the world around you fades, imagine the sound of a distant Victrola, the muted clink of an ice cream, soda glass, the whisper of skirts along pavement, and the faint, rhythmic slap of leather shoes on linoleum. You are entering a forgotten weekend, a long afternoon, a leisurely evening in 1920s America. Let us begin, as all peaceful stories should, with a slow immersion into the gentle pace of everyday life. Imagine yourself seated on the wooden steps of a modest front porch. The house is small but sturdy, perhaps in Iowa, or Georgia, or a quieter borough of New York. It is Sunday afternoon, 1925. The sun casts soft shadows, and the air carries the faint sweetness of garden phlox, mingled with the scent of tobacco from a neighbor's pipe. You are not alone. All around the country, families are enjoying a day of rest quietly, and with ritual. In towns and cities, leisure time was often modest but cherished. A Sunday newspaper might arrive in the morning, thick with stories, crossword puzzles, and advertisements. Reading was a favored pastimino only for news but for escapism. Popular novels by writers like Zane Grey or Booth Tarkington might pass from hand to hand in a household, their pages slightly dog-eared, their plots soothingly predictable. By afternoon, neighbors might gather for coffee or tea. There could be card games, bridge, and euchre were perennial favorites. The clink of porcelain cups might punctuate long stretches of gentle conversation. Radios, still a novelty in many homes, hummed softly in the background, delivering weather reports, sermons, or live dance orchestras broadcast from distant ballrooms. Children, meanwhile, played in the streets, jump rope, marbles, and jacks in the city, stickball and hopscotch in small towns. In rural areas, open fields offered room for imaginary kingdoms or pick-up games of baseball. Leisure for them was physical and noisy, though rarely intrusive, the sort of background clatter that faded into the rhythm of a summer's day. In the countryside, Sunday might be quieter still. Church in the morning, often followed by a long midday meal: fried chicken, fresh corn, chilled buttermilk. The meal was lingered over, not rushed. Conversation moved slowly, punctuated by silences that felt neither awkward nor empty. Afterward, people might sit on porches or lie in hammocks, digesting both food and thought. The surrounding world offered little in the way of artificial entertainment, so nature itself became a sort of companion. The murmur of crickets, the occasional drone of a passing airplane, still novel enough to turn heads upward, filled the silence. Books and magazines were common here as well. The Saturday Evening Post, Ladies' Home Journal, and Harper's Monthly offered serialized fiction, household tips, and gentle commentary on the world beyond. For those with a piano in the parlor, music provided another escape. A family might gather in the evening to play simple songs, Let Me Call You Sweetheart, or Ain't We Got Foon in Halting Harmony. And then, of course, there were walks. Walking was perhaps the most democratic pastime of the decade. Couples strolled arm in arm down quiet roads. Mothers walked infants in carriages. Friends paced in small groups, speaking softly. Without the distraction of screens or the blare of portable music, the world was alive in a slower, fuller way. Each step was a chance to breathe, to observe, to feel time stretch gently outward. Even in cities like Chicago or Philadelphia, green spaces were abundant and well used. Parks provided respite from the noise of streetcars and telephones. People fed ducks, sat on benches, or simply watched the world go by. Those with a nickel to spare might treat themselves to an ice cream cone, bought from a corner stand and eaten slowly, before it could melt. This was a time before the standardized work week had been fully realized, before leisure had been professionalized and marketed at scale. In many cases, leisure was simply the absence of labor, and into that space flowed a quiet, unfussy appreciation of what was near, and familiar books, cards, conversations, music, air, light. As twilight approached on a day like this, lamps would flicker on, casting yellow halos on lace curtains. A screen door might creak open and closed. Somewhere, a dog barked, and the day folded into evening without rush or drama, just the natural descent into rest. Let us now move, gently, from these intimate, everyday moments into the lives of those whose names are still remembered, figures of the time, whose leisure and fame became a spectacle in itself. As we leave behind the slow hum of ordinary neighborhoods, let us drift now into another sphere, gleaming with magazine covers, radio interviews, and the warm applause of a nation fascinated by fame. The 1920s were a time when celebrity, once a privilege of only the very powerful, began to extend its velvet ropes to athletes, actors, and industrialists. These public figures, while exceptional in their accomplishments, also spent their leisure in ways that both mirrored and shaped broader cultural trends. Let's begin with one of the most prominent names of the decade, Babe Ruth, the Sultan of SWAT. While much is said of his legendary home runs and baseball feats, his time off the field was no less noteworthy. Ruth was known for his boisterous love of fine food, tailored suits, and late-night escapades in New York's upscale hotels. Yet between these grand gestures, he also enjoyed simpler pleasures. He was a frequent visitor to Coney Island, where he reportedly delighted in hot dogs, roller coasters, and mingling with ordinary fans. In many ways, Ruth embodied the new idea that even heroes were allowed to enjoy themselves publicly, without pretension. In Hollywood, Clara Bow, the original It Girl, captured the imaginations of millions not just on screen, but in her carefully documented free time. She loved speed automobiles in particular, and was known to race through the Hollywood hills in convertibles, her hair undone, her laughter catching the wind. But she also enjoyed dancing, quiet reading, and like many young women of the time, attending late-night speakeasies. Though often hounded by press and studio handlers, she occasionally retreated to quiet beaches or modest cabins in the mountains for solace and escape. For the upper echelons of finance and society, leisure often meant country clubs and estates. Tycoons, such as Henry Ford and John D. Rockefeller Sr., curated lives of measured opulence. Ford, for instance, preferred rustic retreats in Michigan. Though built with refined simplicity, these getaways were outfitted with innovations of comfort and efficiency. He spent many weekends organizing vagabond trips with friends like Thomas Edison and Harvey Firestone, traveling the countryside in customized Model Ts, camping under canvas, and discussing technology and philosophy beneath starlit skies. Meanwhile, literary figures like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway treated leisure as both muse and medicine. Fitzgerald, ever the chronicler of excess, spent hours at jazz clubs, lounging with flapper companions, and drinking illicit cocktails in Parisian salons or Long Island manors. His leisure was laced with melancholy, as if every dance step carried a shadow of fading time. Hemingway, more austere, preferred fishing in quiet Cuban waters, or big game hunting in the American West. This moments of rest hard-won and often solitary. It's easy to imagine, through the lens of photographs and memoirs, that these individuals lived in a separate, glittering world. And to some extent, they did. Their leisure was expansive, curated, and sometimes performative. But even amid their wealth or fame, these figures sought out much of what others did: the camaraderie of friends, the escape of motion, the simple joy of being momentarily unobserved. An interesting figure who bridged both everyday and elite leisure was Josephine Baker, born in St. Louis and rising to stardom in Paris. She was not just a performer, but a cultural icon. During her off hours, she raised animal cheetahs, parrots, even a pigeon found refuge in the countryside. Her leisure was bold and personal, unconstrained by expectation. She gardened, painted, and wrote letters, often under the sun-dappled canopies of French orchards. As we gently drift through these portraits, we see that the 1920s began to elevate the idea of public recreation. People didn't just have leisure, they displayed it. And in doing so, they set trends, created envy, and invited imitation. The famous became aspirational templates for a generation learning to enjoy its free time in new ways. Now, let us turn from the luminous lives of the famous and delve into another kind of fascination and buried in the earth and hidden in the margins. Let us explore the realm of mystery, of silent artifacts, and cultural curiosity. As we move gently from the lives lived in the spotlight, we turn now to the hushed reverence of museum halls, the dry rustle of newspaper clippings, and the soil-stained fingertips of amateur archaeologists. The 1920s were not only a time of fast cars and jazz melodies, they were also an age of wonder. A decade when the past beckoned with tantalizing silence, and Americans found fascination in ancient civilizations, mysterious relics, and the cultural echoes of distant lands. One of the defining events of historical fascination in the decade was the discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922. Though the excavation took place in Egypt, its effects rippled across the Atlantic. The news reached America with breathless speed, and soon the nation was enthralled. Newspapers chronicled every detail: the golden mask, the statues, the sealed sarcophagus. In homes across the country, conversations over dinner or beside the fireplace lingered on the mysteries of the pharaoh's curse and the secrets of the afterlife. But more than just dinner conversation, this discovery seeped into the culture of leisure. Egyptian motifs appeared on everything from cigarette boxes to cinema marquees. Women wore beaded dresses with stylized collars and geometric embroidery, echoing the aesthetics of the Nile. Even architecture, especially in theatres and hotels, embraced a fleeting phase of Egyptomania, where decorative pillars and motifs hinted at papyrus reeds, scarabs, and sun discs. Closer to home, Americans also found fascination with their own buried past. In the dusty corners of the Southwest, amateur archaeologists and local tribes unearthed artifacts of the ancestral Puebloans. Cliff dwellings, ancient pottery, and stone tools sparked both admiration and, at times, careless exploitation. The newly established National Park Service began guiding curious visitors through sites like Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon, their quiet grandeur contrasting the bustling cities to the east. For the leisure seeker of the 1920s, these experiences were less about academic study and more about romantic adventure. A train ride westward, a guided tour through desert ruinsit, offered a gentle thrill, the feeling of brushing against time itself. It was not uncommon for vacationers to return with hand-sketched maps, rubbings of petroglyphs, and stories of the dry, echoing stillness inside ancient stone homes. Museums, too, became sanctuaries of this historical curiosity. In Boston, Chicago, and New York, institutions expanded their collections, offering quiet, contemplative spaces to spend a weekend afternoon. Exhibition halls, cool, dim, and echoing with soft footfalls, invited the mind to wander. Glass cases held arrowheads, tools, fossilized bones. The accompanying placards were sparse in words, yet rich in implication. This era also saw a rise in collecting as a hobby. Stamps, coins, fossils, even postcards. People of all classes began curating their own private museums. Young boys collected Civil War buttons or Native American arrowheads found in nearby fields. Elderly men organized cigar bands by region and color. Housewives preserved vintage valentines or lace patterns in scrapbook albums. These quiet acts of gathering became a form of leisure, rooted in memory, preservation, and personal meaning. But mystery also lived in the speculative. The 1920s were a high point for spiritualism and interest in the unseen. Seances and Ouija boards, though originating earlier, experienced a cultural resurgence. In candlelit parlors, groups of friends might spend a gentle evening with hands hovering over a polished board, listening intently to the faint movements of a wooden planchette. Was it real? Was it trickery? For many, it didn't matter. The experience was a shared reverie, a leisure activity that blurred the line between belief and performance. For those with academic inclinations, anthropology and ethnography books were growing in popularity. Works on Native American customs, African tribal art, and Asian religious practices found their way into home libraries. These readings weren't always accurate or respectful by today's standards, but they reflected a growing desire to understand the wider world, a curiosity that was deeply rooted in both wonder and the quiet leisure of armchair exploration. And so, across newspapers, drawing rooms, museum halls, and remote canyon trails, the 1920s revealed an America that found rest not only in diversion, but in discovery. A mystery didn't need solving. It simply needed to be observed, pondered, and softly folded into one's understanding of the world. Let us now wander from the mystery of the distant and ancient into the structured rituals of the familiar and domestic. In the next segment, we'll gently explore how the American home and its rhythms shaped leisure, especially among the women and families who rarely found their stories in headlines. Now, let us quietly open the door to a house on an ordinary street, perhaps in Kansas City, or Columbus, or a growing suburb outside Los Angeles. It's the mid-1920s, and the home is neither grand nor modest, but balanced in that comfortable middle space. A two-story frame house, perhaps, with a small yard, lace curtains at the windows, and a tidy hedge that signals the rise of domestic pride. Within its walls, leisure unfolds slowly, almost invisibly, folded into the rhythm of chores completed, meals prepared, and the rare, satisfying moment when all is still. For many women, especially those not employed outside the home, leisure did not arrive in long, uninterrupted stretches. Instead, it slipped in during pauses between ironing and setting the table, between mending socks and reading to children. These moments were deeply valued, even when brief. A quiet hour with a needle and embroidery hoop, a chapter of a library novel while the stew simmered on the stove, a handwritten letter to a sister, composed in a sun-warmed corner of the kitchen. Domestic leisure in the 1920s was defined by comfort, modest indulgence, and a growing embrace of modern conveniences. Electric appliances, a household could afford them, offered a form of liberation. A washing machine or electric iron shaved precious hours off weekly labor, allowing more time for relaxation. Even those without such luxuries found solace in routine. Dusting, sweeping, baking, they were not only tasks, but rituals, and when completed, they made space for stillness. In the evenings, the living room transformed. Children gathered on braided rugs to listen as parents read aloud The Secret Garden, or Black Beauty, or serialized stories from the youth's companion. A gramophone might be wound by hand, its needle placed with care onto a thick shellac disc. The music soft, crackling, and sweet might be a waltz, or a gentle foxtrot, or perhaps the latest crooning ballad from the airwaves. Board games and parlor amusements found their way onto many tables. Checkers and dominoes were perennial favorites, requiring little instruction and promising light-hearted competition. Charades, too, was common, requiring nothing more than imagination and a willingness to play. The radio, still in its infancy during the early part of the decade, grew in prominence as the years passed. Families would sit, hushed, before the warm wooden cabinet, listening to distant voices. News bulletins, comedy sketches, even church sermons broadcast from hundreds of miles away offered a new kind of connection. The house, once confined by its walls, could now hear the pulse of the nation. For children, leisure inside the home was tactile and imaginative. Paper dolls, marbles, jigsaw puzzles. Girls learned to knit or crochet. Boys constructed models from tin or whittled with pocket knives under supervision. Homemade toys, crafted from scraps of cloth or bits of wood, were cherished as deeply as any store-bought trinket. The kitchen, so often the engine of the home, was also a place of bonding and gentle entertainment. Recipe cards, written in neat cursive, were passed from neighbor to neighbor. Baking became both necessity and pastime. Apple pies, sugar cookies, and banana bread perfumed the house, their scent a quiet reward for shared effort. Sundays were especially still. After church and lunch, families might sit together doing little at all. A father with the newspaper, a mother with mending. Children sprawled on the floor with illustrated books. The clocks ticked on in rhythm with soft conversation and long stretches of silence. Time was not always plentiful, but it was savoured. Yet, domestic leisure was not confined to the nuclear family. Extended relatives and neighbours were frequent companions. Visiting was a key form of entertainment. One might walk across the street for a cup of tea, stay for an hour or two, and return home refreshed by friendly talk and shared understanding. There were no urgent calls to answer, no screens to check, just the presence of another, across a kitchen table, offering stories and a plate of lemon cookies. In these space rooms filled with soft lamplight and the scent of furniture polish, the rhythmic hum of the radiator, the creak of well-worn floorboards, leisure felt like a sigh. It was gentle, communal, and unhurried, a space to be rather than to do. From here, let us step out of the parlor and into the wider world again. For while many Americans spent their leisure at home, others ventured out in search of excitement, novelty, and community. In our next segment, we will stroll through the vibrant public spaces of recreation, the dance halls, the movie theaters, the amusement parks, and discover how Americans gathered together to spend their free time in the glow of electric lights. As the sun set on a 1920s evening, another kind of leisure quietly came to life, no behind lace curtains or under front porch awnings, but in public spaces, under the gleam of electric bulbs and the rhythm of distant drums. With coins in their pockets and an evening to spare, many Americans stepped out of their homes and into the shared pleasures of recreation. City and town alike offered spaces of gathering and amusement. The dance hall was one of the most iconicing, with the strains of jazz and ragtime, the laughter of young people, and the soft scuffing of shoes on polished wood floors. These halls were rarely extravagant, though the larger cities offered grand ballrooms with chandeliers and mezzanine levels. Most were modest venues with long wooden benches, a small raised stage for the band, and banners fluttering from rafters. Here, young couples met, flirted, and practiced the popular dances of the day: the Charleston, the foxtrot, the shimmy. The music was live, often performed by small ensembles of piano, drums, clarinet, and trumpet. Even those who didn't dance came to watch, to listen, to sip soda or ginger ale at the fringes, and feel a part of the buzz. It was, in its own way, a communal act of joy. Beyond the dance floor, the movie theater became a temple of leisure in the 1920s. Picture palaces with velvet curtains, gilded columns, and ceilings painted to resemble the night sky. For just a nickel, sometimes a daimyo could sit in cool, cushioned darkness and watch flickering images of distant places, beautiful people, and fantastic stories. Silent films, accompanied by live piano or organ music, drew crowds of all ages. Stars like Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, and Rudolph Valentino captivated audiences with expressions and gestures, their on-screen antics prompting peals of laughter or hushed sighs. The experience was immersive, a form of collective dreaming. People entered the theater from the dusty street, their pockets perhaps nearly empty, and for 90 minutes they were swept into a story beyond their own. Children often attended matinees, clutching pennies for popcorn and giggling through slapstick reels. Adults came after dinner, sometimes in work clothes, sometimes in their finest evening wear. And for many, the weekly trip to the cinema became a sacred ritual, a break from the demands of daily life and an entry into the magic of narrative. Then, there were the amusement parks, which dotted the landscape in surprising numbers. Coney Island in New York was the most famous, but cities across the nation had their own versions: electric parks, lunar parks, or simply the Midway. These were places of color and spectacle, with rides powered by electricity, games of chance, and novelty acts. The scent of roasted peanuts and saltwater taffy mingled with the distant roar of roller coasters and the chime of game bells. Families came during the day, pushing strollers along wide lanes, sharing lemonade and cotton candy. At night, couples wandered beneath a canopy of light bulbs, their faces softly illuminated as they tried their luck at ring toss or watched high-wire performances from the stands. Even small towns had travelling carnivals, fleeting, magical arrivals that turned empty lots into realms of sound and motion. Children rode carousels, wide-eyed at the painted horses and blinking lights. Parents watched from folding chairs, sipping strong coffee or chewing on licorice ropes. Of course, public recreation also included quieter pleasures. Bandstands in parks hosted summer concerts. Church basements held potlucks and community dances. Public libraries extended evening hours, offering silent reprieve to those seeking solitude among the stacks. And soda fountains, those marble-topped counters, nestled inside drugstores, offered an affordable and sociable way to linger. Here, teens shared banana splits, elders sipped chocolate malts, and the occasional passerby read the newspaper while the ceiling fan turned above. What united these experiences, grand or humble, loud or hushed, was the sense of shared time. Leisure in public spaces wasn't just about entertainment, it was about connection. It reminded individuals that they were part of something larger, a community, a generation, a changing world. And so, the electric nights of the 1920s glowed, not only with invention, but with laughter, with music, and with the soft hum of voices echoing under awnings and marquees. As we leave these vibrant public spaces behind, we turn now to a different sort of divide, contrast between how leisure unfolded across lines of class, geography, and privilege. In the next segment, we will quietly observe how free time differed for the wealthy and the working class, and how those differences shaped the rhythm of the American experience. As we drift onward, let us now explore the subtle and sometimes striking contrasts in how Americans spent their free time, depending not on preference, but on circumstantiation, wealth, geography, and class. In the 1920s, as modern leisure blossomed in its many forms, so too did the quiet divisions that shaped who could truly enjoy it, and how. For the wealthy and upper middle classes, leisure was often expansive and leisurely in the truest sense of the word. These individuals, particularly in urban areas, lived in large homes or high-rise apartments, staffed with domestic help. Their time was not constrained by the physical exhaustion of labor or the immediacy of survival. Instead, their hours of rest were shaped by preference golf in the morning, shopping in the afternoon, cocktails and dancing in the evening. Country clubs became increasingly popular during this period, particularly for those seeking an air of exclusivity. On well-manicured lawns, men in cream-colored trousers practiced their swings, while women in drop-waisted dresses strolled the shaded pathways, parasols in hand. Tennis matches, bridge tournaments, and afternoon teas structured the day. Vacations, too, were becoming a staple of upper-class leisure. Summer homes on the coast, lakeside cabins, and even trips to Europe were not uncommon for those with means. In contrast, for the working class and rural poor, leisure was a more fleeting, precious thing. A few hours after work, a Sunday off, the rare treat of a local fair or a second-hand phonograph. Many Americans, especially immigrants in industrial cities, worked long shifts in factories, mills, and kitchens. Their leisure was found in the margins. A cigar on the stoop after supper, a game of cards with boarders in a tenement room, a homemade kite flown in a vacant lot on a breezy afternoon. In rural areas, farmers and their families found time, mostly after chores were done, after livestock were fed, and fields tended. A fishing trip, a trip to town for supplies, or an ice cream cone at the drugstore might serve as a week's sole recreation. Even so, these moments were not without joy. A quilt made slowly over weeks, each square sewn by lamplight, a barn dance with a neighbor's fiddle echoing into the hills, these were quiet expressions of rest, of beauty amid labor. Children's leisure also bore the mark of class. In affluent neighborhoods, children played with manufactured toys, rode tricycles on smooth sidewalks, and spent time in supervised playgrounds. They might take music lessons or be read to from books purchased new and bound in bright cloth. In less wealthy homes, children often played with what they could, find tin cans, discarded buttons, bits of cloth. Games were invented on the spot, passed from one child to another like folklore. Summer meant long days outside, barefoot on hot pavement or dusty grass, returning home only when the sun dipped below the trees. Education, too, shaped leisure. The more educated had access to a broader palette of leisure options: books, museums, music, travel. For those who had left school early to work, leisure often remained physical. A pick-up baseball game, a walk to the next town, an evening at the local hall for music and dancing. Still, both groups sought the same core thing: relief from responsibility, a moment to breathe. Race also played a role in the geography of leisure. In many cities, Black Americans and other people of color were restricted from certain public space pools, theaters, parks. As a result, parallel leisure institutions thrived: Black-owned clubs, cinemas, and community centers. In Harlem, for example, dance halls and jazz clubs flourished not only as entertainment, but as safe, proud expressions of culture and identity. The Harlem Renaissance was not just a literary or musical movement, it was a way for leisure to be claimed, reshaped, and made vibrant in the face of exclusion. The contrast was not always stark. Sometimes it was in the texture of the cushion, the cost of the soda, the distance one had to walk to reach a park. but it was felt deeply and daily. Yet, even amid these differences, there were shared threads. A love of music, the joy of story, the comfort of company, the desire to set down one's burdens, even for an hour. In that way, perhaps, leisure was not so much divided as it was refracted, bending gently through the prism of class, lighting different paths, but always pointing toward rest. And now, as we continue our gentle exploration, let us pause and listen to the hum of innovation. In the next segment, we'll examine how modern technologies, radios, automobiles, and new appliances reshaped how Americans engaged with their free time, offering both more possibilities and new rhythms of life. As the decade unfolded, humming softly beneath its surface was a quiet revolution, not of politics or protests, but of switches flipped, knobs turned, and engines started. The 1920s marked a profound shift in how Americans spent their free time, because they had more of it, but because technology subtly changed what leisure could mean. Let us begin with a device both magical and mechanical, the radio. In 1920, there were perhaps only a few thousand sets in operation, built and tuned by hobbyists with a patient hand for wires and tubes. But by the close of the decade, millions of households owned radio-sleek wooden boxes that brought music, news, drama, and voices into the home with the flick of a switch. Radio programs offered a new kind of leisure, communal, yet private. Families gathered around in the evening, the lights dimmed, each person listening intently. Popular broadcasts included music from distant dance halls, comedic sketches, and serialized adventures. The sound quality was imperfect by today's standards, but that imperfection added a kind of charm, like peering through a frosted window into another world. This new leisure was passive, but no less profound. It redefined the rhythm of evenings and offered companionship to those living in isolation. For the elderly, the lonely, or the housebound, the voices from the radio could fill a room like guests at a quiet gathering. Meanwhile, another technology changed, not just evenings but weekends and entire summers: the automobile. Henry Ford's Model T, famously affordable and famously rugged, transformed the shape of leisure itself. Suddenly, Americans were not tethered to streetcars, train timetables, or the edges of their neighborhoods. They could drive. Sunday drives became a staple of family life. There was no destination required. The journey it's down tree-lined roads, across rolling hills, or past quiet towns became the experience. Children rode in the back seat, windows down, feeling the wind whip through their hair. Couples drove out to picnic spots, bringing sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and thermoses of lemonade. Roadside culture followed quickly. Diners, motels, and filling stations cropped up, each offering not just services, but an invitation to linger. Even small towns, once isolated, found themselves connected by this new thread of asphalt leisure. And within the home, electricity and household appliances subtly reshaped what leisure could be, especially for women. The washing machine, the vacuum cleaner, the electric iron, these weren't entertainment, strictly speaking, but they shortened tasks that had once consumed hours. That time, once spent boiling water or scrubbing floors on hands and knees, could now be reimagined. Magazines of the time were filled with hopeful suggestions. Use your new free hour to read, to rest, to craft, to host a friend for tea. In practice, the effect varied. Some women found their workloads simply reshaped rather than reduced, but many did discover small windows of leisure they hadn't known before. Their lives no longer dictated solely by the sun or the stove. The phonograph, too, provided music on demand. No longer did one need to visit a dance hall to hear the latest foxtrot. One could now place a disc on the turntable, lower the needle, and fill the parlor with melody. Records were collected, shared, and discussed, an early form of personalized entertainment that made the home a stage of its own. And let us not forget the motion picture projector, which a few affluent families brought into their homes. Short reels of silent film travel logs, comedies, nature scenes could be shown against a blank wall after supper. For most, this remained a novelty, but it hinted at something larger: the idea that leisure, once social and outward, was beginning to turn inward, made portable, made private, made mechanical. Even leisure pursuits that had long been manual, like photography, were transformed. The Kodak Brownie camera made snapshots accessible to everyday Americans. People captured their picnics, Their pets, their children's birthdays. These photographs were tucked into albums and placed on shelves, physical memories of time enjoyed. What ties all of these innovations together is not just convenience, but intentionality. Americans were beginning to craft their free time more deliberately. Rather than simply resting after work, they could now curate an experience, choose a broadcast, plan a drive, pick a record, snap a picture. Leisure, like work, became something to organize, something to improve, something to shape. And in doing so, it grew ever more central to the identity of the Ageno, just how people lived, but how they saw themselves. Now, as we prepare to close our eyes on this remarkable decade, let us spend one more moment with those whose leisure was often overlooked. In the next and final full segment, we'll gently explore how children and young people crafted their own worlds of recreation through play, mischief, exploration, and imagination. As we soften our gaze and lean closer to the quieter corners of the 1920s, we find children scattered across fields, sidewalks, and stairwells crafting entire worlds from simple things. Their leisure was not written about in headlines or captured in formal portraits, and yet, it offers one of the most sincere reflections of how Americans, at their most unguarded, passed the hours between work and sleep. In the cities, street play was its own kind of ecosystem. Children darted between parked cars and stoops, their laughter echoing through tenement-lined alleys. Sidewalks became chalkboards for hopscotch grids. Gutter edges served as makeshift goal lines for kickball or stickball. Skipping rope was more than exercise, it was a rhythmic performance, with chants passed down like old songs. Cinderella, dressed in yellow. Boys might trade marbles, their palms dusty and deliberate, choosing each orb with the intensity of a poker player. Girls collected paper dolls, often cut from catalogues, their edges softened by frequent handling. When a game ended, another would begin without fanfare. Leisure, for children, flowed without structure, defined by shared interest and a keen sense of imagination. For many, toys were simple and durable. A wooden yo-yo, a hoop and stick, a cloth doll stuffed with rags. The rise of consumer goods did bring more manufactured playthings into the home. Wind-up trains, tin soldiers, and teddy bears, but homemade toys remained common, especially in working-class and rural homes. In the countryside, leisure was often a blend of play and participation. A walk through the woods could yield wildflowers for the table or firewood for the hearth. Children learned to fish, to gather berries, to whittle. Time not spent in school or on chores was filled with tree climbing, fort building, and long meandering conversations under the wide sky. Many children in both town and country found joy in books. Libraries expanded rapidly during the decade, and children's sections grew in turn. Titles like The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Little Women, and the Oz series passed from hand to hand, often read aloud at bedtime or shared in whispers under classroom desks. For children, these stories were not leisure in the adult sense, they were portals. As they entered their teenage years, young people stepped more confidently into social recreation. School dances, community picnics, and skating rinks offered structured fun. In wealthier neighborhoods, there might be piano lessons, tennis matches, or even organized summer camps, where days were planned around swimming, crafts, and song. In less affluent areas, leisure was more improvised. A garage dance, with a borrowed record player and a floor swept clean. A bonfire gathering with neighbors, marshmallows toasted on wire hangers. Youth culture, though not yet named as such, was beginning to take shape, especially with the help of radio and cinema. Teens imitated the gestures of movie stars, memorized popular tunes, and swapped slang borrowed from vaudeville and jazz clubs. For many young people, work and leisure were already entangled. Teenagers took on part-time jobs delivering papers, helping in stores, watching younger siblings. But even then, they carved out time for escape, a soda after work, a walk with a friend at dusk, a letter written in careful penmanship and tucked into a drawer. There was a wistfulness to youth leisure in the 1920s. It was before the formalization of adolescence, before the marketing of teen lifestyles. Children and teens lived between two worlds, contributing to households and communities, yet still wrapped in the enchantment of discovery. And so, in those moments hidden behind barn doors, beneath trees, under the yellow pools of lamplight in shared bedrooms, young Americans shaped a leisure that was fleeting but pure. It was play not for improvement, not for display, but for its own sake, for joy, for curiosity, for the long, slow stretch of summer evenings that seem to never end. As our journey now slows, and the bustle of the 1920s fades into the distance, we will gently turn toward our final reflection. In the concluding passage, we'll draw together the threads of this quiet decadette's rhythms, its rituals, its many modes of restand, contrast them with the hush of your own evening now, here in the present. And now, dear listener, as the long corridor of time narrows gently into the hush of the present moment, let us sit for a while with what we've seen. The 1920s, so often remembered for its glitter and noise, offered another world beneath the headlines, the world of quiet hours and unremarkable afternoons. Americans rested in ways that were simple, sincere, and deeply human. A newspaper in hand, a game of cards, a walk beneath the trees. They did not always speak of self-care or downtime, but they knew instinctively the value of stepping back from labor, of folding time into comfort, into family, into play. We watched as young boys played marbles in alleyways, as couples danced beneath golden light, as women paused at the end of a long day to sip tea in a quiet kitchen. We listened to radios crackle with distant orchestras and followed the slow turns of Model Ts down country roads. We stepped into parlor rooms, onto boardwalks, into movie houses, and behind the fences of neatly kept gardens. Leisure, in that decade, was not yet a product. It was not yet optimized or interrupted by screens or notifications. It was, instead, something lived, something felt, something small and full of texture, a patch of sunlight on the porch floor, the scent of fresh bread, the tick of a mantel clock in a room where no one spoke. And so, as you lie there now, perhaps eyes closed, or drifting slowly towards stillness, you are closer to those long-ago lives than you may realize. You, too, are practicing leisure. You are honoring time by releasing it, if only for tonight. Let your thoughts wander, gently, like the jazz melodies that once floated through city windows. Let your breath settle like dust in the golden quiet of a Sunday afternoon. You are at rest. And in that, you are no different from those who came before you. May your sleep be easy, your dreams soft and unhurried, and may you carry with you the comfort of knowing that even in the loudest decades, even in times of change and motion, there have always been quiet places, and they are waiting for you still. Good night.